Football Manager is being released for the first time in 2 years on November 4th. That is the announced release date. And since I've been keeping track of it religiously, this is everything we know about the game so far. After canceling the previous game that was supposed to originally come out in November and then delayed till March and then canned, the company did not make another public statement in 2025 after all that happened, until August 13th when it dropped this. Back better, building for the season ahead. Match day first look coming soon. Essentially a 30-second teaser to whet your appetite. And because there'd been so little communication, my appetite was whetted sufficiently. It's like a damn waterfall on the palate, brother. And you can understand why. The graphics in this kind of teaser look were things that we'd really never seen in Football Manager before. So this took expectations and raised them to 11. And since then, there have been 4 feature drops that have been released by Football Manager. There was the match day first look, then the look at UI, then the women's football discussion, and then a match day experience thing. Seemingly all of it laid down on a bed of this one catchy looped tune. We'll head back to the start of the timeline, the first look reveal. What did we learn from this? Besides having to pick our jaws up off the floor, because what SI has clearly given us with this first look reveal was basically visual porn, which to be fair was not something that Football Manager was really capable of before. The impact of the Unity engine on the lighting and the kind of stadium atmospheres was immediately apparent, but we also got our first look at the players, who, well, they still look like players in Football Manager. They've got a nice 1,000-yard stare going, and they look like they're made out of clay, but not in like a cute, endearing claymation sort of way. But look, you can only improve so many things so much. This first look also gave us a look at what were some new animations that have been added to the game. Like this beautiful pass, or a clean looking save like this one. But this video was also the start of the reckoning. While watching it, everybody was obviously tremendously excited, but it was becoming apparent that this wasn't going to be some sort of quantum leap for Football Manager from where it was to what maybe it could be. It was just going to be a rather large step in that direction, and of course getting on to Unity, which is what they keep advertising in all of these announcements. If you're wondering what Unity is, it's essentially the engine that the game runs on, the engine that the game is built within, and Unity is capable of producing games that look like this. Obviously, Football Manager doesn't look like that yet, but now because it's in that engine, it is possible, right? And I guess that's part of the point that they're trying to make with this. But I'll be honest, as somebody that's been starved of a new Football Manager for 2 years, watching this entire trailer, I was perfectly happy to overlook anything that didn't seem fantastic and incredibly excited. But this entire first look reveal was essentially just watching highlights in Football Manager, and outside of seeing how the game plays a little bit, we didn't get too much information. That was about to change though. So if we move along our timeline, our next stop is the UI, and this is the announcement where we really got a feel for how big of a change this was for Football Manager, and not just the fact that, hey, it looks better, which is great. The first order of business is the sidebar is gone. The sidebar that was there. It is gone, it's been replaced by the top bar, and there's these new sections that exist. You have the portal, which seems to be your kind of home page, for lack of a better word, and you see underneath it, there's different sections that you can go to: opposition report, news site, calendar, messages, all that stuff. And as is demonstrated in their near 4-minute video, which in my opinion, out of all the videos we're gonna watch, is the best made, it is thankfully a video that is not, it doesn't lean too much into just the hype beast of it, and it's just somebody explaining to you in a cool and excited way the new features and changes coming to the UI. They also only use the word bespoke once in this video.
Bespoke.
Which, that word has become a bit of a buzzword at the SI offices, and it might be the most annoying word in the English language. And there is another video we're gonna look at later where they use the word bespoke multiple times. Somebody just needs to ban the word bespoke from SI keyboards everywhere.
Bespoke.
You see, as you click on each one on this top bar, you're presented with a bunch of different options below it. You can also click the drop down arrow, it seems, to go to those options. So sidebar has been traded in for what appears at first glance here to be a more user-friendly experience of being able to get directly to different screens through the UI. This was something that had been discussed preliminarily going into what was supposed to be FM25, because the UI capability of the Unity engine is significantly better than something like Unreal. I didn't know any of this, I'm not an expert in this at all, I just learned about it as Football Manager was revving up its promotion of switching to Unity. Obviously, Football Manager is a super super UI intensive game. So in a lot of ways, this announcement was always going to be more important than the graphics announcement, because Football Manager's UI needed an overhaul. There's a reason basically everybody uses skins that plays the game on computer anyways. But it's a tricky thing to do to present that amount of information. The game is also realigned in a way that uses tiles and cards, as they call it, which are these little sections of information that essentially if you click on these sections of information like team report or whatever, you can open up a new screen with a lot more information. This does a couple of things. One, it organizes the information so that they can put more on one screen, and then you can click around to open more things up. It allows you to be one click away from more things. I get that. It is also more console friendly, which a lot of people that play Football Manager play it on console. There are not a ton of people out there that are fortunate enough to have like a gaming computer and a console. Not that you can probably run Football Manager on a smart toaster still, but you get the idea. And the explosion in the popularity of people playing Football Manager has not necessarily come from the computer side. It has come from people playing it on console through things like Netflix that maybe you or I don't necessarily think about because we just get the game on computer the day it comes out. But of course, even with that sentence, I'm only talking to a part of it. The jury is out on whether redesigning the game to be more accessible to console is going to lead to anything bad. Obviously, we haven't been able to get in here and click around yet to see how well all of this works or if it's super buggy or whatever. But it definitely is a cleaner use of space, and considering there are no skins applied to what we're looking at right now, it's hard to argue that this isn't a better way to present information. They also announced an overhauled bookmarks feature, which maybe was in the game before, but was not something that was advertised very heavily. It's in the top right when you see the full screen, and you can basically bookmark the screens that you go to the most to try and cut down on UI travel time. Now, we looked for something in these different sections that was groundbreaking or that they accidentally leaked, but there does not seem to be some new transformative section that's been added to the game. I guess that's not a surprise considering how much overhauling they're trying to do to everything else. They did also show the player screen as a part of this, and the player screen has been redesigned to make the numbers bigger. It's still not like some sort of flawless use of space. They've broken off the set pieces, skill set part of your attributes, so corners, free kicks, long throws, and penalties are now in a different section from technical, mental, and physical, which is a good idea. Somebody probably should have thought of a while ago, but definitely great to have in the game now. And all those weird boxes that were at the bottom before are gone in lieu of what are basically those cards or tiles or whatever that you can click on and get more information about at the bottom of the screen. But critically, something I didn't think of, they've also overhauled the search feature. The search feature in Football Manager right now is a complete disaster. If you search Barcelona, you're more likely to get a club from Ecuador than Barcelona. Now it sorts this stuff a lot better. This is the visual presentation of what happens when you search Brighton. You can see the manager, different members of the staff, messages that you've received that contain the word Brighton, which is awesome. The search feature, has all the functions in one place here. And there's also something called FMpedia. So if you just search something called training, you're going to get a bunch of different guides from within the Football Manager game itself about training. At least the way they're presenting it, it looks like a huge upgrade. And the idea of FMpedia is nice, although it does mildly threaten my job, so maybe I should be worried. But before we step to the third part of the timeline we're working off of here, it's important to note that Miles Jacobson, who is the head of Sports Interactive, the company obviously that makes this game, has done two very public interviews that I'm assuming are a part of the advertising push for this game. He is not somebody that has been publicly available essentially since the game was canceled at all. Both of them went to the New York Times, a couple other areas. They're worth mentioning because if we're talking about everything we know about FM26, this does bring up the fact that they knew as early as December that FM25 was not going to be ready. That's when Miles Jacobson says that he made the decision that wasn't going to happen. It also reveals that they had serious issues transferring the code, and according to some online forums, they extrapolated on this, they expanded on it, saying that it showed that Sports Interactive didn't necessarily understand what they were really attempting to do in converting the code in the first place, but clearly, now that we're at a point that the game is being advertised the way it is, they have eventually managed to overcome that hurdle. But it is still the exact same team working on this game. That's another thing we know about FM26 is literally no one was let go from Sports Interactive after the game failed to be released. So they're getting another crack at it here. And perhaps most importantly from this first interview, Miles Jacobson pointed out that FM26 is not going to be what FM25 was going to be. They've basically peeled some of that back and kind of remade the game again because they didn't like the direction that FM25 was heading, which raises the question before we progress on our timeline. There are certain things that were excluded from FM25. It was announced, like international management. Does that mean they're back in for FM26? At this point, we don't know. But the thing is, I would imagine if they're not in the game, they would say nothing. If they are in the game, they will say something about it at some point. So the longer it goes, the more likely it is those things they announced that were removed from the game are going to stay removed from the game, because they just need to, say, well, yeah, of course that carried over to FM26, even though they've made clear that they kind of rebuilt the game for 26 as well, and that there were features that they were planning on putting in 26 anyways that they're now able to include. But of course, we don't know what those are. And Miles' second interview is going to be important as we continue along our timeline, because the third stop is how women's football is going to be included in Football Manager 26. The first thing to note is that the database has nearly 42,000 people in it. This is players and coaches, but they have gone out and scouted and added a ton of people. So the database work behind the scenes here over the last couple of years to get a women's database up and running is pretty nuts. I mean, you consider the fact that that is a lot more people just on the women's side of the game than FIFA has ever had in its total game ever, right? They're getting a lot of information, and they do have a very large functional women's footballing world now. And an article released on their website does show you all of the loadable leagues, 2 in England, 1 in the US, Germany, Japan, Italy, Sweden has 2, Denmark, Australia, Wales, and of course the Women's Champions League in Europe. But the discussion around women's football also leaked a few things. One, this is what the screen looks like when you're choosing a club. And at this point, you're starting to get a very clear idea about how Football Manager is going to look now and into the future. It's these kinds of squares and stuff. But visually, I mean, this is a better representation. Although it is hard to find the unemployed checkbox, it is up there in the top left corner. Took me a little while, but you can still start unemployed. They also discuss in the interview, the articles, and the video how the women's football management experience is going to feel different. The transfer market prices are obviously different. The contract lengths are shorter because that's the norm in the women's game. All those sorts of things have been taken into account. It would kind of be weird if they hadn't, right? But the prices and stuff they're saying are going to be accurate to women's professional football. But the most intriguing thing about this 2.5-minute launch video they put out for women in Football Manager is that the match engine feels very different with the women. And that's because they mocap women over the course of a couple of years to get a whole set of, they basically rebuilt the animations here. Which, one, you can imagine that took a while, and two, that's going to produce a match engine experience that feels completely different because it's using animations that we've never seen before. The goals look different, the players move differently, and that is all obviously a big plus to Football Manager, because the way Football Manager's graphics and match engine work, in most cases, you could have expected it to be kind of almost a clone of the men's game. But they really did actually pay a lot of attention to detail in making sure that the women's game feels like the women's game when you're managing. What that might do, this is just pure thought project here, different tactics might work in the women's game compared to the men's. Just because the match engine plays differently, there could be a serious tactical learning curve and difference in moving in between the genders in football. And because all of this is integrated into one database, so you can see it in the women's article here, you've got your men's leagues and your women's leagues that get loaded up. You can do a journeyman where you manage in both realms of professional football, like all of that, the staff and stuff, all of it's happening at the same time. You can go check who won the Women's Champions League while managing the men of Manchester United, right? That it's all there. And for me, it could be fun to experiment what tactics are working in those different places. It also expands all sorts of challenges where you try and win the Champions League on every continent. Well, now you gotta win the Women's Champions League too, right? There are a couple of random things that I was interested in that Football Manager does clarify. One of them being there is a kind of hidden attribute they talk about in the video that determines whether coaches are going to move back and forth. Like some coaches will just coach on the men's side, some coaches will just coach on the women's side, and some will move back and forth based off of this kind of hidden rating that's given. And then also pregnancy and the menstrual cycle. Both of these things are really a big part of the women's game, and Miles Jacobson, this is where the interviews come back, said in his interview about including women in Football Manager, they are looking at both of those things for the future to potentially add into the game in the right way, but for now, they are not going to be a part of women's management in Football Manager. And that brings us to the final and biggest stop on the timeline of what we know so far, which is the match day experience. And while this one was a little light on the goods, it did give us a much longer look at the way the match engine plays, because the video clocks in, kind of like the UI video, at 3.5 minutes long. It announces in this video that there are hundreds of new animations, but they come from this thing called Hawkeye that basically does motion capture of real matches. So what they're trying to do anyways is take, different motions that happen in real matches and load them into the game. But hundreds of new animations is obviously not an incredibly large number, so as you watch this match engine for 3.5 minutes, you do still see recognizable kind of Football Manager movement.
Bespoke.
The biggest difference in the way the match engine plays so far that a lot of people have picked up on, and I did too, is the fact that players will stand up their opponent before attacking them. In Football Manager previously, it was kind of just go, 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 or stop, stop, stop. But now, like this video right here, you see a player stand up their opponent and then look to break them down with a dribble and then hit them with an actual dribble move. In watching this entire video, that's the biggest thing that jumps out. This is another good example from the video. You see a player receive the ball, stand up the defender, and then kind of use a change of pace and acceleration that is so important to dribbling in real life to actually beat their opponent. There are a couple of features that they announced in this video, one being improved player intelligence, so you're going to see more through balls through the middle of the opposing team, kind of like that one right there. They've also announced that they've included a lot more camera spots so that the highlights will look better and the camera can change dynamically in order to show you the best angle for a highlight. Like when a player's taking a corner, there is now a camera behind the player taking a corner, so that's just a quality of life improvement that adds to the immersion.
Bespoke.
And they've also announced something called dynamic mode, which is that little tick box up there at the top. This is a highlight mode where if you're beating a team by 4 goals, you're basically going to see almost no highlights at all as the match goes to the end. But if you're in the World Cup final and it's 1-1, you're going to see basically every possible highlight because it's such an important match and the match is so close. It's a dynamic mode that's designed to try and keep you from having to switch between highlight modes when, let's say, a match is over and you just want it to end, or when you really want to see everything that's happening because the drama is peaked. It's a good idea. We'll obviously see how it works in practice because it's the sort of thing that you have to play 100 hours to really feel out whether you like it or not. And they also dropped this in-match overlay. Basically, when you're between highlights, you get this sort of overlay which shows you where the ball is on the field and what's happening at the bottom. It's beautiful. It moves at whatever speed, obviously, you set it to, but this shows you where the pressure is being created. This is night and day for people that love tinkering with tactics. And I love tinkering with tactics. If I'm on key highlights or dynamic highlights, I still want to know where the flow of the game is going, which winger or which midfielder is making the runs, making the plays, creating the threats, which defender is getting destroyed, where's the pressure going, and where's the ball spending the most of its time. This little overlay at the bottom is going to let me keep track of all of that while I'm managing a match. I think it is sneakily one of the biggest things they've shown so far. This screen also soft launched the idea that there are in possession and out of possession tactics, because if you look, it says formation, parentheses, IP. And assuming they're not just talking about intellectual property here, that means there's in possession and out of possession tactics, which has long been highly speculated, especially going back to the leak about all of the different roles, which I will link a video from my live channel of me breaking down those different roles if you happen to miss that. But while some people, including me, were maybe a little disheartened that there wasn't a bigger improvement in terms of the overall match engine, considering how much of the switch to Unity is capable of, I will show you my favorite highlight from this match day experience that looks unlike anything I've ever seen in Football Manager before. Erling Haaland, with a perfect body contortion here, plays the ball out wide to a runner on the left wing. This ball's going to take a short hop, and then the way it's handled in the match engine is played perfectly. It is hit the exact way that would deliver this kind of trajectory for the ball, and Haaland on the 1-2 then taps it into the back of the net. When you watch that highlight in full motion, it looks very realistic. Not all of the highlights in this match day look give that off, but this does. Because normally in Football Manager, you get one of those just giant robotic kicks to finish it off, but this is just kind of a redirecting tap, which Football Manager, I guess, has now been able to incorporate into the game, at least in some cases. Because in other places in these match day looks, you still get the that's my max flexibility, by the way. I just figured I'd leave it on that high note, because even though there's a ton of hype for the game and they've dropped a couple of announcements, that's just about everything we know about FM26. I'll be sure to attach all of the trailers if you want to watch them in their entirety. If you want to read the articles, I'll make sure to put all of that stuff down in the description. See you on stream. What was that?
Bespoke.